Back in 1987, Japanese game producer Hironobu Sakaguchi created Final Fantasy, believing it might be the last game he'd ever make. 2 decades later, Final Fantasy is a household name, with over 30 games under this brand. One reason for this is the memorable characters, such as these, the top 10 dudes of Final Fantasy. To qualify for this list, a character needs to have a crapload of Y chromosomes, and he needs to be interesting and at least somewhat vital to his respective game. And only games within the core series count, not any of the spin-offs. Some players may say that Squall is the personification of everything that's wrong with the Final Fantasy series. He's a dude who's angsty and emo and depressing, yet everyone looks to him for all the answers, like he's a guru or something. Yes, he starts off as a moody jerk, but that's the point. As the story goes on, he gets an attitude adjustment, albeit a very slow-moving adjustment. He suffers from the porcupine's dilemma, afraid of getting close to anyone for fear of getting hurt. As he opens himself to love's possibilities, he rethinks his priorities and stops living for just himself. In the end, he's still the same person, only more willing to lend an ear to his friends.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore. Too funny.
It was your idea.
You know what? Forget it.
Thank you.
I didn't choose Auron because he's so cool he wears shades in the dark. I didn't choose Auron because his sword is a hell of a lot better than Squall's. I chose Auron because in Final Fantasy X, there are 2 other guys who are such complete idiots that there's gotta be some other dude with a badass factor that cancels out the other's idiocy. Oh, and zombies seem to be all the rage in video games nowadays, but it's Auron who is the original video game zombie. You see, there he is! Blink and you'll miss him! The world of Final Fantasy IX is a pretty diverse place. Hell, it looks like the African savannah in The Lion King. And yet Vivi finds himself all alone. There seems to be no one around who looks like him. He's basically a little boy who's a little shy and very polite to everyone. And he can do offensive magic. He's like Dennis the Menace with the flamethrower. I mean, of course he is. He's patterned after the Black Mages from the very first game. When he finally discovers his people, Vivi goes through a whirlwind of emotions. First confusion, then horror, and then suddenly happiness and hope. It's a journey of self-discovery that's heartfelt and relatable. There are many people out there who would like to learn about their origins, and it's for them that Vivi was made. Zaz is a victim of circumstance. His son Dodge ran out of his view for just a moment and received a curse that guarantees a bad end, and he's taken into government custody. As if that wasn't enough, Zaz received his own curse and was excommunicated, only to be thrown into a fight for his life. He certainly didn't ask for any of this. He's basically a good man who respects the law, only to have the law unfairly turned against him. He actually starts out as a comic relief, then gradually turns into a tragic figure. A lot of credit has to go to his voice actor, Reno Wilson, who really makes you feel Zaz's pain. I suppose now is the time when I should mention the baby Chocobo in Zaz's hair. Yeah, it's silly, and some might call it undignified. But it could be worse. Zaz has a Chocobo in his hair, while Snow has a Chocobo as his hair. Zidane reminds me of James Bond. Because he gets all the ladies. Well, no, not really. It's because he's a good fighter, a sharp dresser, and he knows just the right thing to say every time. He's just so damn perfect, I'm sure he irritates a lot of people. But damn it, you can't help but admire him at times. He's the glue that holds his ragtag team together, the flame that attracts people like moths. I guess after having moody leads in the last 2 games, Square decided to follow up with a cheerful lead. Zidane makes friends easily with his cheerful attitude and carefree outlook on life, and it pays off for him in the end when he suddenly turns into a grumpy Gus. His friends are there to pick him back up, so he can run through thick forestry like he's Tarzan or something. As for that tail, it's a good thing he's got it because, you know, without it, he might fall over. Hey guys, have you ever had a girl tell you she wouldn't date you even if you were the last man on Earth? I like to hear someone say that to Noel because once upon a time he was the last man on Earth. But then Doc Brown came along in his DeLorean and took Noel hundreds of years into the past. Or at least, that's what would happen if I produced this game. I have a funny feeling a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this one. I'll admit, Noel wouldn't really stand out in a lineup. He's very generic looking, just a blue-eyed boy with wild brown hair. But what I like about him is that he's refreshingly drama-free. Well, not entirely, there's gotta be some drama. He also works well opposite Sarah, Lightning's sister. And he's strong-willed, level-headed, brave, humorous. Holy hell, forget Snow! Sarah should hook up with this guy! Quick fanboys to your fanfiction blog sites! You know what to do! I didn't say all the entries were going to be heroes, did I? Good. Sephiroth is kind of a strange case. In the first few hours of gameplay, you never see him. He's mentioned a few times, but it's not enough to grab your attention. It's not until you see the president of Shinra, dead with a samurai sword stuck in his back, when you realize there's someone of significance working behind the scenes. Shortly after, you finally learn Sephiroth's background. He was a soldier and a peerless swordsman who was feared as much as respected. One day he learned a horrid secret about himself, and it made him rethink his priorities. Ever since then, he's been trying to attain... Yeah, that. He has a truly unshakable presence. Whenever he's on screen, you can't help but glue your eyes on him and wonder what he's going to do. He actually doesn't do much of anything, really, until... Now who could forget this scene? This guy killed Eris, a young girl who was the last of her people, making fanboys around the world cry. And from then on, things only got worse. Kuja is someone who definitely knows a thing or two about fashion. He has long eyelashes, revealing clothing, wide hips. He plays with his hair sometimes. Why did I include him again? Let me look through my notes here. Oh, it's a typo. Oops. Kefka is a fancy dresser too, and he looks like a circus clown. But he's less Barnum and Bailey and more like the Joker. I wouldn't be surprised if the Joker served as a source of inspiration. Kefka is a servant of the Gestalt Empire, working with the military in the invasion of the northern continent. He goes to any length to get what he wants, even if it means killing people in the cheapest way possible. In fact, seeing people get killed might actually be the very thing that he wants. He's a magic user, which is rare in his world. He was one of the first people to be infused with magic, but the process was still experimental, and it made something in his mind snap, driving him insane. He now has a great bloodlust that nothing can truly satisfy. Once you hear just the first few notes of his theme song, you know trouble is on its way. Like Sephiroth, Kefka has an unshakable presence. At one point, Kefka is thrown in jail, and our heroes go off on a peace mission. and then the story seems to be over. Justice is done, peace is achieved, and everyone appears to be in a good place. And then Kefka appears and ruins everything. He's higher on this list than Sephiroth because he performs more visually impressive feats. It's too bad those feats are all in 16-bit. Going from one extreme to the other, Cecil is a man who's plagued by his guilty conscience. He is a warrior who had the utmost loyalty to his king. His loyalty is then put to the test when he is ordered to commit theft and to kill anyone who opposes him. Cecil carries out the orders to the letter and immediately wishes he hadn't. Once push comes to shove, Cecil decides he's had enough of the king's shit and he strikes out on his own. He's led to a temple on a mountain peak where his desire to repent for his sins turns him into a girly man. Hey, what's one more effeminate man in the Final Fantasy series? As a matter of fact, he might be the very first one. The story of Cecil reiterates a simple but important lesson. If something seems wrong, it might not be best for you to simply ignore it. Nonetheless, a guy like Cecil might seem a little too good to be true, which leads us to the number one spot, a guy who really is too good to be true. Cloud is the first superstar of Final Fantasy. This has to do with several reasons, such as the strong marketing campaign for the game, and gamers' excitement to see a Final Fantasy game in 3D. I think it also has to do with that huge-ass sword of his. You think he's trying to compensate for something? You don't imagine he's borrowed Austin Powers' never mind. Cloud is a former member of Soldier, which is kind of like a Navy SEAL, but with a much more generic name. I mean, come on, Soldier. They couldn't think of a better name than that. He's cocky, arrogant, and headstrong, which irritates Barrett to no end. Even so, his heart's in the right place. That is, when he isn't blowing up power generators for money. He claims he's only living for himself, and he doesn't care about others, but you can tell he's putting on airs. His childhood friend, Tifa, thinks the world of him, and yet Cloud makes her uneasy. He says things that don't make sense to her, and he knows things he supposedly shouldn't. He also gets out of control at times, acting not of his own free will, and he suspects Sephiroth has something to do with this. This air of mystery, coupled with his heart of gold, is what makes Cloud my number one man of Final Fantasy. You also got a feel for the guy because he was right in front of Aerith when she got killed. Honestly, I think this scene should have been written better. After what Sephiroth did, would you turn your back on him? Still, it's an emotional scene, forever etched into the minds of gamers everywhere. Fun fact! What do Cloud and Lightning have in common? They both have bedheads! Eesh, imagine what their baby will look like. And when it's grown up,